Welcome to the Marvel Alliance podcast, where we cover anything and everything to do with the Marvel Universe. From the comics, TV, and movies, we will go from Earth 616 to the Mojoverse to the TVA in order to bring the Marvel Universe right to you. I'm the man without fear, Chris.
I'm your friendly neighborhood Brent.
Alliance Assemble.
Symbol.
Volume 190, and as promised, you got a double dose of Brent and I this week from Marvel Alliance. Last night we did the Marvel's review at that point, and now, I think the thing that people are really excited about, I hate to say, or I like to say, whatever you look at it, but this finale of Loki. Possibly,
I think
more
that's
than
a fair
likely,
assessment.
a series finale as it's looking more and more likely for this show.
I would call fact on that. Yeah, I think I don't think we're getting a season 3 of Loki.
Yeah, which is fine. The way they left it, we can still, despite I think what Tom Hiddleston, I think people are reading way too much into what he's saying. I think for right now, his character's not needed to come back for a bit. He can act like he's done with it for a little while.
Yep, totally agree.
So, but all right, so let us do the network plugs and get to the episode. And as we said up front, ladies and gentlemen, this is just going to be a straight Loki review. We know we've got some news that dropped this week, a couple of things with delays and things like that. We're tabling that to we get back to our show proper back on Thursdays next week. So I know Brent and I have enjoyed and the little stint on Fridays, but I think both of us are looking forward to ending the reins back to the DC Alliance guys, so that way they can actually properly enjoy their Friday nights.
Absolutely. It's nice of them to rent out their space.
Yes, exactly. We do appreciate that. So, all right. So, the network plugs. We are part of the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network with 7 shows covering the wide range of geek and nerdom. To see the full schedule, check out the show notes below and subscribe to the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network on Twitter at GUA Pod Network so you know when all the shows drop. We also have a Patreon, so if you want to throw a couple of shekels our way, we've got 2 tiers. Our dollar tier is our tip jar to say, hey, you think you're doing a good job? And then we've got our $5 tier with ad-free episodes, early access episode, and Patreon-exclusive shows, including our show. We Can Watch This All Day, the Marvel Alliance MCU Rewatch. We've got 22 episodes up there, all the way through Infinity War. Brent and I are going to be recording Endgame the week of Thanksgiving, I believe. I think that's what we got on the docket. Yep, that Monday. So, and that'll drop the following Monday after that for the patrons. So, we want to thank our patrons. We can't do this without your support. You've got the DC Alliance guys doing the DC films through the years. Catwoman's on deck for them. And we got a lot of back content out there. So, if you want to if you're not a member and want to become part of our Patreon, go to www.patreon.com/GUA Network. And to be a part of that. But if you can't join us on Patreon, totally understand. If you want to take 30 to 90 seconds and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts, we greatly appreciate that 5-star review. And last, but certainly not least, we want to thank our official sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com, for omnibus hardcover collected edition needs. JP and the crew at OPB have got it going on with excellent customer service, immaculate packaging, ships around the world. And we got about 3 or 4 more days to lock in your final order cutoffs for the current pre-orders that are going on right there. Get that extra discount. And while you're at it, use that code MARVELGUA at checkout to get $2 off every single order. And we want to thank them for being an official sponsor. All right, Brent. So, again, we got everything done. We've already talked about the show going back to its normal time slot. So let us get into this. It was a double dose of Marvel for us. And, though I enjoyed the Marvels, this was what I was really looking forward to when I got home, just going straight into Loki, watching this. Non-spoiler thoughts right off the bat. What you got?
This episode was absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant episode. Capping off a brilliant season, if you ask me. I've definitely seen some people asking the question, is this the greatest thing the MCU has ever done? And while I don't know if I'm willing to agree with that to that point, I will tell you I understand why they're asking the question. The character development that Loki has gone through since this incarnation of Loki left the Avengers through season 1 through now the end of season 2 is nothing short of incredible. Just the development that he has gone through, and the fact and the way that they made us care about all these other relatively minor and side characters that we had never heard of prior to this show. Mobius, B-15, Casey, OB, Sylvie, of course. it's just they did such an incredible job. And I know going into this season there was a lot of people just questioning it, a lot of let's say cautious optimism because they don't have the same people behind the camera as season one did, but they clearly have enough of the same people that they picked up where season one left off, and they went all the way through and they nailed it. They hit a home run for sure.
Yeah, and as I just noticed, our background was still in the Marvels. I was like, oh, there's something wrong with that. So, um, this was by far, and Brent and I make, as last night showed, we call Marvel out when we love things, but we also call them out when things aren't necessarily driving in our way. This by far, and I make it no hyperbole to say, this is the best season finale of any Disney Plus MCU show they've created. Just bar none, hands down. I'm calling my shot on that one. It was absolutely from start to finish outstanding work. And from tying up all sorts of kind of the loose ends that were hanging out there, from the character development, and then putting the breadcrumbs from where we are going to be heading to post Loki at that point, not just for him as a character, but for the TVA and some of the others that are there as well. So I mean, it's hard, it's hard to kind of separate the two in the sense of season one, season two, because I like what one of the kind of heads, one of the showrunners was saying about it, is like they looked at this as the chapters of the same book. First season, first half of the book, second season is the second half of the book. It's all one story. It is all one story. And they bring it to a very, very touching conclusion for seeing this version of Loki, this variant of Loki, have such a growth and journey through this whole series. Bravo to the team, because it was, I think, something that we had talked about. I know Travis Snell had expressed also concern when you get the original showrunners not being a part of this season and they were changeover. A lot of us were like, we're willing to give him a chance, but a little apprehensive because he had a great thing going. And I'm telling you right now, they took that and made it their own and upped the level. This was by far a great season for them.
It's like the team behind season one walked so they could run this season. And in reality, I don't mean that to be any deferential to season one. Season one is fantastic. Going into this season, we'll save rankings for season two later, but season one I think absolutely was my favorite of the Disney Plus shows, even more than WandaVision. And so nothing against season one at all. In fact, with this episode, Loki now has, like, I have a small list of like my absolute favorite Disney Plus Marvel episodes. There's only like 5 on the list, like truly 5 on the list. And just episodes from different shows. Werewolf by Night would probably be on that list too, but it's not really a show, so it doesn't count as much. But Loki now has 2 entries onto that list, and it's just amazing. Like they know how to do a finale. I tell you, when they're doing
both
like
seasons,
the whatever process put this show together, either season, that's some of the process they need to do some emulating on with some of the other stuff going forward. That's where they should be looking.
And they had a lot of hats to juggle and to close. I wasn't worried they weren't going to close it out, but like some of the stuff I had kind of not necessarily forgotten about, but would have like overlooked in the sense of bringing a close to. They did it. They didn't forget about anything, in my opinion. So, but all right, ready for non-spoiler thoughts, Brent?
Yep.
I mean, excuse me, spoiler thoughts. We just did
I know what you
spoilers.
meant. I know what you meant.
All right, so we're going to take our first ad break before we get into spoiler thoughts. So, listeners, these ads help keep the lights on the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network. We don't choose what ads come on, and they can be a bit loud. Give it that 3 count before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. And we are back. All right, so let's start with the title of this episode. Glorious Purpose. This is the same exact title as episode 1 of season 1, and that is not done without thought.
It's all a loop, snake eating its tail. It circles back on itself. I love when I saw, I was like, wait a minute, haven't they used that before? And I looked, but yes, they have. And I love that. I thought that was just a fun little bit they did there.
Especially, and it gets even more interesting when they begin with the Marvel Studios logo and start going backwards. Not only the whole fanfare, like visuals going backwards, but the music being played backwards, and
which I believe was the Loki.
bad.
It was the Loki theme that was going backwards, I
Yes,
believe.
it
But
was.
so you have the Loki theme backwards, you have the fanfare backwards, which picked up on immediately. Like, this isn't how this is supposed to start. It didn't sound half bad. You're right, and it really put me in a mood for some crazy time shenanigans, which I think they delivered on.
Oh, yes. And this carries on in one continuous shot with it taking us from where the loom is and working towards the control room and even, like we said, the music. But the point of the loom is very much the goal, is where all things change later on in the episode. The opening shot takes us through the TVA and homaging the opening shot from episode 5 in season 1, taking us through the void. So, there again, this is, and I'm going to bring this up a little bit later on when all the callbacks of how season 1 is being homaged to in season 2 with these different episodes. So hold that thought. I thought interesting on my second watch of seeing the little callbacks here and there. And we see Loki then slip into place. We get a different perspective of when, because we saw it from one angle when he was slipping into back into place, and then than how he did it again. So now things don't go too well in the opening, and we see Victor is killed once more. And then we get this Beethoven, it's a Beethoven mix from the 70s. They go in where where it's one of these kind of Benny Hill trying out different things. I mean, all I could think of throughout this whole time was, Groundhog Day, trying out different things to
Again,
see
again, again.
again, try to do it. And I was wondering how many times we would have to get it before we made a change to how he was approaching it. And I thought that was, again, okay, it's a little bit faster, but every time he'd start to explain, say, yeah, but you're wasting time. I know you need to explain it, but you're not really changing anything outside of getting there a few seconds earlier.
Right, like he's trying to talk faster as though he's suddenly going to change. And eventually he makes the connection to that and he says, not faster, earlier. Earlier. Need to
Hmm.
move the whole thing earlier. But it only goes earlier by, what I presume is a couple hours or so. Nowhere near long enough at this point. Because it's at that point that he goes back to when Miss Minutes and Ravonna had Timely, like in that little conference room thing, and he's like, Miss Minutes, I know
Hmm.
you're upset. I know you're hurting, but we need your help right now because we're trying to do this thing. And I'm like, I still don't think
Yeah.
this is going to work. I don't think it was back far enough.
Yeah. And I do love it that we also catch the word skin that was written on the monitor that Mobius did way
Yes.
back in episode 1. That is still present there as well. So Victor again is yet killed again and again and again, which, way to letting us know that Kang is still a threat. He just can't necessarily ignore that. So now earlier in the season, we watched the death of Miss Minutes saying, you'll never be him. And in hindsight, we thought I'm kind of thinking a little bit differently on that one. That I was originally thinking she was referring to Victor, but what if she wasn't talking to Victor? She was talking to Loki.
Potentially. I don't think, and I'm not convinced that Miss Minutes, especially at that time, knew what would happen. I don't think she knew what was going to, because I don't think He Who Remains knew what was going to happen. And so it
Hmm.
like, because what Loki ends up doing surprised everybody.
That is true. You're right. But I was kind of thinking about it in hindsight, seeing how it worked out. What if she knew? So,
I mean,
but
I just
uh, go ahead.
I don't think she could have known, because He Who Remains didn't have that knowledge, because He Who Remains thought he had everything tied up in a bow from his perspective, and Loki went off script. So because Loki went off
Hmm.
script, Miss Minutes could not have accounted for that.
Okay, yeah, fair. Uh, Now so far the series has been operating on the bootstrap paradox. I've gone over this on the show, so go back in the episodes. I'm not going to rehash it again. Now, they then now use time travel to send this, in a different way using that. Now we operate with rules similar to the butterfly effect, in which one's able to travel back to certain points in their life. So time is obviously viewed in a linear manner by humans, but this theory says that one's able to go back to certain points of their own life, no longer viewing in a linear fashion, allowing someone to go back to a certain point in their life with knowledge that they attained in the future. This is similar to what Dr. Manhattan had in The Watchmen, and also Amy Adams in Arrival. Now, both of them have this cause and effect feeling of what's going on. It's a lot of a lot of quantum mechanics and ideas, but this was something that was discussed in Days of Future Past. Calling back to there, where this could lead He Who Remains still being out on top, and perhaps this is all part of its own loop.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I've been talking for the last couple of weeks now about how I feel like there's a lot of loops involved in here. And again, there was the whole thing was by design set to loop back on itself over and over again. So yeah, I think that makes sense.
Mhm. So now at this point, Loki goes back even earlier when they first brought out the model of the loom, and Obi once again really embarrassed, does the whole like callback to Back to
Yes.
the Future, and they kind of replay moments of that scene, but this time the dialogue's really really rushed because Loki's trying to say we got to go, we got to go, got to go. Now this model, he's just saying, "Oh, it's perfect. Let's move on from this." Now, even though the lines are the same and everyone's kind of confused about what's happening, they can't enjoy what's happening because it feels like it's all in a rush to them as well. So at this point,
Yes.
Loki realizes needs to learn everything Obi knows, and he's like, "How's that going to take?" Like, well, how much do you know? Let's just assume I know very little. He says, "Well, that could take a while." Like he says, like a couple of hours. Try years, and then I love how Victor goes in or centuries. It comes
Yeah,
up
that
saying
line where
century.
he's like, I know little, but I'm a quick learner and I'm a
Yeah,
god.
yeah.
And it's like you're a god, but yeah, like you just said, Victor and the centuries line, it's like, oh my gosh. And then they do it centuries later.
And my question is, how many centuries? Like we're talking 500, 600, 700 years he's been doing this. And I want to give a we didn't even talk about this last week, but we forgot to mention like the real name of OB is AD Doug because we see it on the book. I had forgotten to call that out last week that we know his real name now is AD Doug.
Okay, yeah, tell me.
Um
You're
so
right. I hadn't thought I saw it, but I didn't make any connections with it. So what am I missing?
Well, I couldn't make a connection to it either, and then a friend of the show, Ryan Airy, had pointed out on Screen Crush that it is possibly and more than likely a nod to Douglas Adams, who's the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the
Oh,
Galaxy,
okay,
that
okay.
explained that the 42 was the answer to everything in life, and the Protocol 42 was what He Who Remains used to wipe everyone's mind. So
I
I thought
like
that was
that.
a good
I
call
like
for
that
him.
one. Yep, that's a cool catch.
hmm The other thing I saw going around with his name is AD is often used as the date things that are after BC. So,
Right, right.
but so now from here we cut to the centuries later and see Loki guiding Victor into the machine. His memory must be amazing because Loki remembers all the stuff he needs to. It's clear that he's also been through this a lot of times before. He's even speaking lines of other people as they before they even say it at that point, saying, "Hey, Mobius, and better watch out, Obi. He's gonna take," and that's when Loki says, "Gonna take your job." Yep, already know what's going to happen.
And as they're getting Victor ready, he's got quite the laundry list of things for Casey to do, for Victor to do, or for Victor like to do outside in the temporal aura and stuff. You know, it's like tape your right thumb, tape your left knee, tape your faceplate, or the temporal radiation is going to kill you, right? Which means that was probably three separate attempts where the
Yep.
temporal radiation got to him. He says, don't set the throughput multiplier down on the ground, or it's going to roll off." And there was a shot at one point where you see him
He
yelling,
was about to
"Don't
do
set it
that.
down! Don't set it down!" The green button, they're out there pushing the green button. Oh, it
hmm
gets sticky because he's been through all of this before.
Yeah,
Yes,
just gotta
and
slam
over
it
and
down
over and
and hit
over.
it.
Yep.
And it was one of those things that's saying that, looking at the time, it's like, okay, there's no way something else is going to happen when they get to this moment. It just seems like it reminded me of what Mobius said about Loki. He's like, you are destined to lose. You're destined to be alone and you're destined to always lose. That is your role. And I was like, okay, something's going to happen that they're still not going to be able to do it. He hits the green button, it fires the shot. They get back. They think that they're all there. Victor says the word pumpkins. And I had to look this up. It actually is a 19th century slang, and it basically means to give yourself a pat on the back. So he's not
Nice.
necessarily enjoying pumpkins.
I assumed it was something like that, but I didn't look it up.
Yeah, so
But it did
um
it did make me think of Ant-Man asking for if anyone had any orange slices. It's like it just took me back to that, just because it just a random little slang thing or whatever.
mhm. So however, unfortunately, the Loomis still ends up exploding, and it makes Loki realize that all those centuries were basically for nothing, and it needed to happen to get this, but it's just a kick in the teeth to let it all happen, even nonetheless. So the monitor sparks up, and we see that the energy is also green, which itself is also a callback to Loki as well. And the branches then expand out and it's due to a scaling problem. They say that it can't. Victor calls us out. It can't. The loom cannot handle the amount of infinite strands. It was never meant to do that. It will always fail. It's not about an expansion problem. They just can never do that. It will always fail.
Yeah, you can't scale infinitely. It doesn't work that way.
Hmm. So it explodes. Loki goes back even earlier, testing the idea that, oh, I've got to stop Sylvie from killing He Who Remains. That's where it really started.
Yeah, and that point when he makes that connection, you're already asking the question: is he going to have to kill her, or is he going to talk her down? And this is where I'm like, oh, maybe he's going to try and enchant her. And we know that that's a skill
Hmm.
like he never picked up that she was able to do to him, and kind of with his help, like he sort of helped do it to Elias, but like him by himself. Enchantment wasn't a thing. I was like, is he going to have figured out how to do that and enchant her to like let her see into his own, or encourage her to enchant him to show like everything that's happened right since that he's been through. That's the way I thought they were going to take it.
Yeah, I thought so too, and I was worried in the sense of like I know I did a Fact or Fiction the other week or so ago that Sylvie would be killed in the end, and I was saying like I don't know if I want to be right about this one.
I mean, it certainly would not have been my preference. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, exactly. Um, I do, when he's fighting Sylvie, I like it at one point that he's basically yelling at her to get through to her. Said like you just want a throne. He said the last thing I want is a throne. Sylvie, stop. Like
Mm-hmm.
he wants her to get through to her, and he's at his point like going over and over into this. He just like he gets even more defeated every single time. And I love how He Who Remains is just kind of cackling in the background, and he constantly says, "See you soon," which is a taunt because it's used in his dying breath. Like we had an idea, "See you soon." Oh, the variants are coming back. No, no, he's taunting Loki. See you real
Yeah, yeah.
soon.
So it when the next time I watch episode 6 of season 1, there's a couple things I will be looking at differently. One is that line, "See you soon," because it's like, is he talking to Sylvie there? Yeah, maybe he kind of was, but it's also a taunt to
Hmm.
Loki. Like at the same time, it's a taunt. And then we thought he was teleporting in season 1, where bouncing back around, bouncing through time or something as they were jumping. No, he was freezing time and then just walking to another part of the room and unfreezing time, and that's how he was able to avoid several attacks prior to their big discussion. That was the other one.
Hmm. And so now He Who Remains is still in his Immortus getup, which is the last known version of Kang. All Kangs eventually become Immortus, and the comics could hint towards what had happened. Um, and Immortus eventually brought all the council together and gave the idea that this was to stand as a united front. However, in the end, that was a lie, and he'd done this so that he'd be able to take them all out at once. So, which is basically what He Who Remained had done. And so now in the elevator, he's being unsuccessful, okay, got to go back earlier. So in the elevator, he also sees Loki's put away his sword, which kind of tips him off that something has changed. And that's very much what we're seeing here with the loop of season 2 all being part of the plan. Just in the same way that episode 1 had Ravonna explaining the Avengers were always meant to change time, Loki was pretty much always meant to do this.
I really liked how they basically did the same bit twice. Loki tries,
Hmm.
fails, goes back, repeats. Try, fail, repeat, try, fail, repeat, just over and over. And they did it twice in this episode. And it feels like just saying it that way, like that's a risky move to do because you just did it. The audience isn't going to like having it thrown at them twice. No, I thought this, I enjoyed both, but I like the second one even better than the first one. I was glad they did it again.
Yeah, and I want to call out this next idea of another theory going, or not theory, but what's going on right here. Josh from Den of Nerds, who predicted that this was all going to be an illusion. This was because the floor in the hologram made it look like it had been a triangle, whereas the real room was a Necker square. And what a Necker square is an optical illusion, possibly hinting at what happened. The battle is really a big thing for the show, and all the action we see happening. The sword. So think about it like this. So the sword throwing magic, it's all spot on, and season two's sort of been a mirror of season one. This is what I was getting at earlier. He had Loki in both arriving at the TVA and not really understanding what was going on. They then team up with their variant, and the bombings would happen, carried out by Nefarious Head. Next, we go to the location before a character was pruned and sent into the void. Mobius was pruned in episode 4, which was mirrored by Ravonna in episode 4 of season 2. That was then end with a big cliffhanger with episode 5 showing us it was not as what we all thought it was. And finally, episode 6, which would culminate in the Citadel and shows just as well structured. So I mean, they were doing the little hints all along.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely, they were like going. This is a show going back and knowing where it ends. You're going to see signs and hints and stuff like that leading up to it for sure.
Mm-hmm. So when Loki asks He Who Remains why he doesn't fight back, and then realizes that he's been through this before, and finally stops things to confront him, it just kind of him mocking him, with him also stating that he paved the road to this moment, that this is something he said in season 1. And I love it when he says, and Survey says that it was him all along, not Agatha this time, but He Who Remains.
Right, not Agatha, no.
So now He Who Remains also talks about reincarnation, which is the same line that he said in season 1 finale. He's really the devil, and it's with this that Loki steps up to the plate and reveals that it isn't the first time he's been through this either, because he calls about it saying, when he stops him, like, oh, you think this is the first time I remember having this conversation?
Right, and that was a pretty badass moment when he's able to turn it on He Who Remains and say, it's like, oh no, we've done this before, and yes, I actually have learned to stop time.
Mm-hmm. And stopping time, he shows that he's mastered it with He Who Remains warping basically Sylvie out of there. He Who Remains sees all, and he mocks Victor's kind of stutter and talks about the failsafe of the time loom. And we discover that the loom was actually works with it, just deleting all the branches that aren't supposed to be there, ensuring the sacred timeline. That's when it said, failsafe activated, thank you for your service. It did its job. That was the whole point of it, and it was always meant to happen. I feel like He Who Remains was also already encountered Loki before. He sees him killing, that he's seen him killing countless different other variants. And He Who Remains says, my variants are already out there. Loki says, I won't stop. And He Who Remains says, doesn't matter. Loki says, that's never stopped me before. And I love He Who Remains says, I know, champ.
Champ. Oh, that felt so demeaning, the way he called him champ, so belittling, which is exactly what he wanted to do.
Yeah. And, I feel like when we get to the end that it may be Loki who goes toe-to-toe with him in either Kang Dynasty or maybe during Secret Wars. Like, I could see him getting just one-on-one with whatever the final Kang version is going to be.
Yeah, wherever Kang's final confrontation is, I think is where we next see Loki, which I think that's Secret Wars at the latest, Kang Dynasty maybe at the earliest. Like I would be kind of, barring a credit scene, like not counting those, but in the main storyline of a movie, I would be surprised if he popped up anywhere prior to Kang Dynasty.
Yeah, and at this point, we see Loki sees the equation on the wall, and he says that he'll break things. However, Loki doesn't seem willing to make the tough choice. As doing this will ruin all his happy moments and destroy his friends too. Not even the sacred timeline will be safe, but Loki promises to find another way. And at this point, He Who Remains brings back Sylvie, which gives Loki the option to make the hard choice. And that's what he said. Like, He Who Remains is like, I can make the hard choice. I'm that's what I'm doing every single time. You refuse to do it. You either kill her or we're going to keep going through this over and over and over again, and you're not going to get the same results. It's literally it's literally the definition of insanity. He won't do it. He is so he wants to save his friend, but he won't make that hard choice. He wants to find option C, which he hasn't found yet.
And I feel like part of that's because he's still not entirely sure what the right thing to do is beyond that. Like he's still not entirely. He thinks keeping He Who Remains alive, it made sense and is the way to go. But suddenly, when he realizes killing Sylvie is the only way to go, he questions that. He loses his resolve. He just doesn't think, is it really the way to go? And that just tells you like the growth of this character. That's how far Loki has grown as a character, because nothing would have stopped him from killing anybody to achieve an objective prior to this show. And so, like, the amount of growth that he has seen since the Avengers movie, where he comes from, is just crazy. And I'm here for it. Like, they really did a great and believable job to get you to this point where Loki is struggling with the decision to achieve his goal, aka save all of time and space, basically, or save his friend, right?
Yeah, very much so. All right, before we continue, we're going to take our next ad break. So, listeners, these ads help keep the lights on the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network. We don't get to choose what ads come on, and they could be a bit loud. Give it that 3 count before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. All right, and we're back. So, from this point, we go back all the way to episode 1 of season 1 and catch Loki in the Time Theater. Him returning to this was actually foreshadowed last week with the time slipping at one point. He actually does come back there. And there's these all important locations throughout the characters' lives that, this is a defining moment for him. He promises to claim his throne again, tying that back to the line from Thor: The Dark World. On the desk, we also see a can of Josta Cola, which is an old cola brand that was out of business, but, Mobius still finds it at that point. Good for him.
You do what you got to do.
Yeah. So this sort of turns into a therapy session, but obviously we have season 1 Mobius. He's still indoctrinated and is just pruning because he thinks that's what the right thing to do. Now, this was another outstanding moment that we don't know this story that Mobius is about to tell, and just a great kind of moment to even grow not only Mobius, but in a way really start seeing Ravona's character and what she became. Mobius tells a story
at a time when Mobius still was very much only saw Loki as a means to an end to get another Loki. If you go back to that episode, he really has a lot of faith and trust in himself, trust in his gut, to go, like, when Loki suddenly starts acting differently and says, I need your help, like, to roll with it. Like, I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I do as well. And so Mobius tells him a story about who was they were going after someone responsible for 5,000 deaths in a Black Sea, a variant, and going out there to prune them. They discovered it was an 8-year-old boy, and it was very much a sort of, would you kill Hitler as a baby if you could go back in time thing. We already know what Scrody would do if that we were to believe it was Scrody at that time.
Indeed. He says go for it.
Yep. The kid wasn't really doing anything, and the hunter refused to make the tough choice, and thus things went awry. And in the end, we learned Mobius was that guy, and I think the 2 boys made him stop because they had 2 sons. And so, though he's not conscious of it, it's clearly buried in his psyche that he refuses to do that. And the person who does take down the variant is Ravonna, because he makes it say, oh, well, she's a judge now, and, I'm here too. She's still a good friend and everything like that. So I'm saying, oh, this really starts adding up at that point.
It's also not the first time. Well, it might have been the first time there, but it's not the first time we were aware of Mobius having a soft spot towards children, because there's that universe or that timeline in the first episode of the first season that has that little boy, and he gives him like a candy bar or something, or a piece of gum. I don't remember what it was. Sends him on his way,
kaboom,
and that way he doesn't have to he doesn't have to see the kid as they prune the timeline.
Yeah, And realizing there's no comfort and that you just choose your burden, Loki then slips to the end of episode 5 and he stops reality from falling apart and takes Sylvie outside time so that the pair can have a conversation. And he tells her that it's designed to protect the loom is designed to protect the sacred timeline and that she has to die so that she can't kill he who remains. And it's sort of like the grandfather paradox with Loki realizing there's a hope that he can replace things with something better.
Yeah, and with the hope that he feels like he can replace it with something better, like again, that goes to just show the development of the character of what he has gone through. Like he actually has hope. He believes in himself in a way that he never really
Mm-hmm.
did before. I mean, yeah, he was always like, I am Loki of Asgard. I'm burdened with glorious purpose, but it was all bravado, right? It was all pomp and circumstance. It was never anything real. But he actually believes he can achieve his goals here.
Mm-hmm. And so now there's a darker side to Loki being in control, actually foreshadowed a lot through this season. Even back in the first episode, we watched as Loki was trying to rationalize why He Who Remains was doing what he did. He was the devil. Calling him the devil also pointed out that he was also a sort of with the devil, as leader, though he'd stripped away any freed will, then so that the other option was far worse. Kang's multiversal war would ravage across the reality and lead to trillions and trillions of lives being lost to the amount of destroyed timelines there'd be. Loki has always been the perfect candidate to become Loki who remains, and him taking over the role was even something he argued for at the end of season 1. Sylvie ended up killing He Who Remains and kicking him back in time, but still his choice was always obvious. On top of that, how similar Loki was to Kang when dealing with so many different options at this point. Go into Quantumania. Janet Dime would have had to allow Kang to wipe out countless timelines, and in the end, she wouldn't have ended up with hope. And so Mobius is in a similar boat that he'll just be serving the TVA until the end of time.
Yeah, and that's a good call on the Janet connection there. I hadn't thought of that at all, but that's a good observation.
Mm-hmm. So now at this point, he warps back to the end of episode 4 and he decides to be the one that goes out on the walkway. And so looking at, I saw this going around. I can't remember who pointed it out on Twitter that there's a saying on the wall for all time, always, which when broken down to its acronym, FATA is in Latin, means destiny.
Oh, I love that. I did not know that, but I love that. That is for all time.
I did not.
That's
I wish
awesome.
I could call out that person. Yeah, for all time, always in Latin, the acronym itself, FATA, means destiny. So,
who catches that?
Cool.
That is fantastic, though.
People who have even more time on their hands than we do.
Great call out.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. So now the reason that Loki can survive this radiation is because he's a god. And even things like Infinity War showed that Thor could survive out in space, and due to their destiny and lifespan, it's very difficult to kill them, which is when we've seen Loki hundreds of times at this point. This shows that it's always been meant to be the destiny that he is to fulfill this. He's worthy, whereas He Who Remains isn't. He's now on the bridge, and so Loki's having this transformative moment. Like, remember that kind of line that he talked about, Thor was in Ragnarok saying how Loki transformed into a snake one time, knowing that Thor loved snakes, and he picked him up and they stabbed him at that point. Well, what is happening to Loki, what a snake does, his skin is falling off. His skin is being taken out by the radiation, and he is growing this new skin of being Loki Who Remains, or Loki God, or whatever you want to call him, the Loki of all stories,
Yeah, the god of stories basically is what it seems like he's becoming there. There's this line he says right before going out on the walkway, which is a fantastic callback to the first Thor movie, where in the first Thor movie, as Odin is standing over Loki, and Loki's
Yes. Hmm.
hanging before he falls. He says, "I could have done it, Father, for you, for all of us." And right before he goes on the walkway in season 6 of episode, or in season 2 of episode 6, Loki, he looks back at both Mobius and Sylvius and says, "For you, for all of us," and goes out. Like, I absolutely love that callback. And I saw some videos showing the comparison. And I know it's been 13, 14 years or whatever. My goodness, Tom Hiddleston looks so much younger in Thor 1 than he does
Yeah.
now. But it is such a great callback that I'm glad they put in there.
And definitely want to give a shout out to Anthony, who was saying, "Will we see him don his like Norse regal outfit at that point?" So you definitely got that right. And
Yeah,
as
yeah.
we
It's
were,
a different costume or different outfit, but right there with it. He got the spirit of it correct for sure.
and you look at the crown too. The crown resembles the cracks of the citadel being fused together through a method called kintsugi, which is an ancient Japanese technique of fusing pottery together. And it could also show that he was the smashed statue at the citadel. He never learned who this was, but having Loki there would have spoiled everything.
And that's where the cracks are still visible in the pottery, right?
Hmm.
But
Yep.
and it's just considered a piece of that, a part of that piece's history now.
Exactly. So tearing the loom apart, this then spreads out to the strands, which Loki starts to pull together. And these act like roots of a tree. And here Loki creates the world tree, grabbing onto all these timelines to give them life, because when the loom explodes, they're dying at that point. So this all connects to Norse mythology and the tree imagery that has been shown throughout the season. Even the vent that led to OB's room was sort of looked like a trunk leading up to the main part of the tree, and tearing open a doorway to the citadel at the end of time. And Loki decides to give everyone a chance. You know, like we were kind of saying, just mentioned. I feel that this is the whole point. Like, Loki is the god of stories, and possibly something else that, again, we're referencing back. Kevin Feige has been in control of the comics as the chief over comics and the MCU. These stories are not necessarily happening by coincidence. Him calling back to certain events and certain arcs of, Agents of Asgard and Avengers Forever. Like,
I
there
like
is a reason these are being called back.
I really like the imagery of basically the world tree, which has been a thing
Hmm.
since Captain America and Thor back in Phase 1, where the world tree was talked about, both of those movies. And effectively, Loki has become the new Loom. He's become
Yeah.
a living, breathing Loom in a way that can handle all the brand, or at least try. I mean, I think it kind of still looks like he doesn't have a hold of all of them, but he sure has a hold of an
Yeah,
awful lot of them.
yeah, there were probably some that ended up, unfortunately, not making it,
And so
and
you
I
got to
think
wonder,
that's
are those going to be ones more likely to sprout, like variants of King and stuff like that? I don't know, but I'd be curious to know what
yeah, I
would
don't know either.
happen there.
Hmm. And so from here we jump to the TVA after and see the tree poster that's been spoiling this entire ending, and we didn't really realize it at the time why it was there.
Yep.
And we also remember back to the mural, the big tree in the mural. We didn't make that connection until now, and it's like, oh, geez, now we know what that was there
Yep.
for a reason too.
Right in front of us the whole time.
Yep. And so we go to the TVA control center, and Miss Minutes is reactivated. And I like Hunter B15 saying, "Are you sure she's not going to, And I like OB just like shrugs his shoulders, like, we're gonna give it a shot."
Yeah. The confidence is very inspiring there, or whatever the line is from B15.
Yep. And she walks over to see Mobius, and they're talking about looking after, going after the variants of he who remains, and he makes a reference to saying that, well, 616 adjacent had encountered one and took him out, and so they are still none the wiser. And what is he referring? And what is Mobius referring to?
Well, 616 adjacent, that's the quantum realm. Kang. He's Kang the Conqueror, the one that
Yep.
Ant-Man was able to defeat. Well,
Yep. And
Ant-Man
this
with
is
help,
also
but
Yeah, Ant-Man with help with ants. Lots of ants.
With ants, lots of ants. Ant-Man used ants. It makes sense.
It does, it does. And so Anthony again called this out. Would we get a callback Mania? And not just a callback, but we even got like those black and white pictures were very much showing King the Conqueror from Quantumania.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, direct
So,
reference there. There's nothing else that could possibly be.
exactly. So, Avengers Endgame was the moment in which Loki slipped out of time stream after being caught by the TVA, and he spent about 2 weeks going on this journey. Like, can you just as hard to see? Like, this is 2 weeks. This is all in 2 weeks. You know.
I mean, okay. Where does the 2-week timeline come from, though?
I've got to go back. I want to say maybe in the timeline book itself.
Okay, because it's worth noting that, well, one, the timeline book itself only goes up to phase 4 per Feige,
Yeah.
and two, it's 2 weeks of like our time, but the TVA is different. I mean, they literally used a title card to say it's been centuries. So it may have been 2 weeks on the sacred timeline that this all took place in.
Yeah.
But in fact, in that case, because like the events of WandaVision haven't even happened yet, but it's been hundreds and hundreds of years for Loki.
Yeah, very true. And so we see on his desk that Mobius has requested a file, and though they want to take the timekeeping murals down, they remain up. And Mobius says that those who don't remember the past, and he kind of says, and the other part of the line are doomed to repeat it. So either way, we learn that Mobius is not going to be joining them in the war room. Mobius is stepping out of the TVA to see what this is, learn all about, like, what is exactly we're protecting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like this is the point of it all. I kind of wondered if they would like that poster you brought up with the timekeepers, if they would like rip off the head off of them or something to show like the timekeepers themselves were not who they claim to be.
Yeah.
But no, they're just leaving it as is. But at this point, everybody knows.
Yeah, exactly. Though he gets offered a chance to be a judge at that point, he says, nope, I'm just going to go back and kind of see what's going on. And then we get to see the war room, which is now like a whole bunch of people are now on the council. And so that, showing the change over the TVA. And they even said 100B15 was like, do the any of the variants of He Who Remains know that the TVA still exists? And they said, nope, we're still. So they're operating in secret now. Like they're going after variants of He Who Remains on the down low. They're monitoring, and if one pops up, that's the one they're going to prune.
Yeah, and it seems like that's now their goal. Like whereas before it was, protect the sacred timeline. Now it's yes, protect the sacred timeline, but protect all the timelines. We are a Kang hunting squad, basically.
Yep. And so we see OB has a new volume of the official TVA manual. So second volume is out in a different color, a nice little yellow. We get to see Victor Timely as a kid, but no book on the windowsill. So that kind of timeline's all changed there. And we do find out that we see where Ravonna. We haven't seen, like, she ended up in the void, and over in the corner, she sees a pyramid and the Sphinx, and we see the underneath her, a bunch of brush blows away, and there's a TVA symbol, like for all time. So is this a version of the TVA that did not like basically failed?
That's exactly what I thought. That it's a version of the TVA from when He Who Remains was explaining that it's designed to fail. I rebuild the TVA, I do a new one. Like, did he effectively prune all the debris, and that's where she is? I saw another interpretation that somebody at the TVA pruned part of it as like a symbolic gesture. But I feel like if that was the case, we would have seen it. So I still think it's that first idea.
Could be, very much could be. But we do see, we hear, and then see on her face what sounds like Alioth is getting ready to take her down. But she doesn't seem to be fazed by that. She looks very determined. So I don't think that we've seen the last of Ravonna Renslayer. And I think that we will see her again in a couple of years. And
Alioth again was my first thought. It's the most obvious thought. Another option, a variant of Kang. It could be a variant of
Yep.
Kang who's actually there together, and I think that could work as well.
Hey, in the comics, she is his greatest love and has popped up over and over and over again.
It would be interesting if we see her again and it is truly this same variant. Like if they're able to tell us like it's the same variant that we've seen before. I don't think I don't think this is the last we've seen of her.
Yeah. So now we watch as Mobius goes back to his old home where he is joined by Sylvie. They're seeing the perfection in the imperfection, and this brings things full circle from what she said to him in episode 4. She said if he never looked, he'd never know, and now he's ready to stay and watch his life. Now, as for Sylvie, we don't know where she's going. We know she's opened up a time door. If you watch closed captioning, it says like time door, sound opens. But we cut to Loki at the end of time on his throne holding it all together, giving them a chance. Like, this is not a permanent solution, but
Mhm.
he is giving them a chance to take down all the variants before they wreak havoc. Um, a tear passes by because of what he ended up giving up. But now, again, that he made the hard choice. He's giving up everything to be with his friends, to see his friends. And now he is the man that now has the burden of glorious purpose.
Yeah, and as Mobius said, his glorious purpose is more burden and it is less glory. And now, well, you know, he comes into the MCU wanting a throne. He now has a throne, and there's nobody there who he has no subjects. He's a king without a kingdom, effectively. Or you could argue all of time is his kingdom, but
I was
he
about to
is
say, yeah, all the
eternal.
branches. Yeah.
But he's eternally alone and he can't really do anything with it at this point. He just has to sit there in solace. He doesn't have subjects. It's not like in Thor Ragnarok when he was pretending to be Odin, obviously a different version, but pretending to be Odin and just enjoying the good life of everybody having to do what he says. Like he is just on his own now.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we get no post credits, no season 2 confirmation, season 3 confirmation like at the end of season 1. And Eric Martin basically said that there is no plans currently for season 3. He was telling this to Cinema Blend, saying we approach this as two halves of a book. Season 1 first half, season 2 we close the book on Loki and the TVA for right now.
And to be fair, they were never going to say otherwise. They're not going to say, "Don't
Yeah.
worry, he'll be back in 2 years."
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I do believe it. Like I don't think they're I don't believe that we will not see Tom Hiddleston again in the MCU. I do believe that there will not be another Loki project. Let's like solo project. Let's put it that way.
Hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. So season 2, how do you rank this?
I have been going back and forth on this a lot, and I would like to put the caveat out of I feel like it could move potentially even higher than where I have it after more rewatches. I went ahead and I currently slotted season 2 of Loki at number 10 on the MCU my MCU rankings. So no, I don't think it's the best thing the MCU has ever put out, but I understand why people think it is. I get where that opinion is coming from. And again, that final episode was just as an individual episode, nothing short of brilliant.
Yeah. Moving around, like I said, I consider Loki season 1 and season 2 like Eric Martin says, like part of the same book. And so on mine, I've done some switching around. It was Loki season 1 was always in my top 10, but it has shift and I have moved it above Loki season 1 and 2, above Iron Man. It now stands as number 6 for me in
There you go.
my MCU rankings. So,
I have
um,
season 1 at number 13 for the record. So
yeah,
they're both pretty high esteem with me.
yeah. So, but yeah, so this is, it was a amazing journey, outstanding conclusion to more than likely the series finale of Loki. Great job, outstanding work. All players involved should be very proud of the work they've done. It is, dare we say, the blueprint, Brent, for making shows.
I think we can say Loki is the blueprint.
Loki is the blueprint, and I didn't even have a chance to put it up on there. But yes, Loki is the blueprint. Madam Web will still be the ultimate blueprint, though.
I mean that yes, yeah, of course.
Yeah. All right. So as we said, this is all we got for this episode. At that point, we will have a lot of news to talk about next week. So Brent, tell people how they can follow you.
Yeah, Brentech Prime on the socials, most active on Twitter, trying to be more active on the other ones.
Yep. And you can follow me on Twitter and all the other socials at Chris Balga. You can follow this podcast on Twitter at Marvel 8 Podcast. We want to thank our official sponsor, organicpricedbooks.com. Use that code Marvel GUA at checkout to get $2 off all your orders there. Let them know you're a listener. You can email the show at marvellianspodcast@gmail.com. You can follow the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network on Twitter at GUAPod Network. Feel free to tweet, email if you want to provide feedback, ask questions. We said this last night on the Marvels. If you got any Marvels questions or anything like that, just DM Brent or myself or the show account. Do not put those out there. We're going to be respectful to the another week before it is now spoilers free, and we'll read those on the show next week. And continue to rate and review the Marvel Alliance solo feed on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcast. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you all for listening. We had no chat today because this was not live. So thank you all for listening. Stay safe out there, everyone. And as Stan the Man would say, Excelsior, true believers. Well, even though we can't do a show without a post credits, can we, Brent?
I mean, if we could, we need to just have like some random sound in the background or something like that.
Exactly, like a clanging
that's
sound.
happened a couple times.
That has. So, all right, post credits discussion right now. Looking at though, we're gonna give a big. If you don't want to hear any kind of possible leak plot for Deadpool 3, stop now. We'll see you next week at that point. So we'll give you time to end it at this point. Thank you all for listening. For those of you wanting to stick around for this, Brent and I want to discuss this potential plot leak coming from My Time to Shine. Hello. Saying that the events of Deadpool 3 take place after Loki Season 2 finale. The TVA has gotten word that the Kangs are gathering and a new multiversal war is about to start, so they create an army of multiversal heroes, mostly from dying worlds, to fight the Council of Kangs. Mr. Paradox is replacing Mobius. Mobius was going to be in it for a while and could still have a cameo, but they decided to just leave him out of this story. He'll be back in the next Avengers movies, Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, and is trying to recruit. Mr. Paradox is trying to recruit Wolverine. Deadpool, who's a prisoner at the TVA after messing with time, because remember, he's got Cable's little time device, hears about this and escapes. His plan is to get Wolverine to come with him so they could become BFFs.
Yeah, we thought this fit with here because with on this show with the TVA. Ultimately, I think this sounds like a ton of fun. Like, I love the idea of Deadpool and Wolverine trying to take on, like, put together a team. We're putting together a team. You think you're the only one, and putting together this squad of characters in an attempt to just take out a bunch of Kangs. Like, just thinking about Deadpool and Wolverine just slashing through a bunch of Kangs. So, yes, please sign me up. It sounds like a lot of fun.
What did you think? You were the only hero on a soon-to-be dead timeline? Come on,
right. You're part of another dying universe, so or something like that. But it does sound fun. Do I wish that Mobius was going to have the rumored larger role in this? Yes, I do. I would love to see that connection. But at the same time, a cameo is more than enough for me. It really is. Like this still is Deadpool's story, and I want it to be Deadpool's story. And so, but having the TVA in there, I would love to have Hunter B-15 or Casey or OB show up. Like, OB and Deadpool talking, that could be fun too. So, somebody else show up.
Yeah. It will be interesting at that point. So I think the one thing we can hear is very consistent is the TVA is going to be a big part of Deadpool 3. Deadpool screwing up the timelines with his Cable's device is going to be a big factor in this. We already know that Wolverine's going to be in there. The strike is over. From what we are understanding, Sean Levy's plan is to start back with filming next week. And they want to get started with filming before Thanksgiving. So right now, we'll talk about this more next week. Deadpool 3 is looking like the only MCU film for 2024. So we're going to pause right here. We're not going to talk about that right now. We'll see y'all next week. Hope you enjoyed your double Marvel Nights. We'll be again back to our regularly scheduled time, Thursday nights, 9:10 Eastern Standard Time. Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.